Cheers, guys. Epix 911, welcome to the Sunday, June 18th, 2017 edition of VR News. Want to start with a game that I kind of found through the, traditional method, not by word of mouth or a review or some upcoming preview, just mucking about with the filter. So the game is from developer Frostbite Games. The big negative for me is that it's Vive only. So on SteamVR, kind of hoped it would be Vive and Rift. Could be that it's one of their first forays into VR. And until they feel that they're successful at this, they're going to limit to just Vive. So let's hope at a future point, if the game is good, it comes out for the Rift as well. But they bill this as an FPS game. So it's kind of FPS shooter meets Devil May Cry in the sense that there's 3 classes and each of them has their own set of skills and combo attacks. And as you progress throughout the game, you get additional attacks and combos for your character, right? Some monsters are going to be weak to some attacks, vice versa. Paper, rock, scissors, some monsters with some classes, right? They're going to match up well, not well, etc. And it'll be up for you as the player to learn that along the way. So 5 to 10 hours of gameplay, and the videos really look good. Like the graphics for this game look fantastic. Now, we've seen it before. You see the E3 footage, the game comes out and it's complete and utter shite. That could be the case here, and that'll be part of the fun when we revisit this game when it's actually in early access, which is going to be tomorrow. So it launches into early access tomorrow. So within the next few weeks, we'll take a look at it again. The game from Frostbite Games called Heroes Never Die. All right. HTC has explained, or rather Daniel O'Brien, their general manager of virtual reality content, explains why they haven't dropped their price permanently yet. So we've seen promos, right? But only Rift has had any real permanent price drop so far. When Road to VR interviewed Daniel, and look, most of the time we talk about Daniel here, it's because of quality issues, right? And I've said before, they're lucky to have him because he does take the position serious enough that he does assist with quality, right? But it's probably not what he prefers to do. He wants to be able to sell the platform. That's his position, right? So he was asked exactly that about the price and why it hasn't been lowered. His response, we haven't dropped the core price of the Vive because we think it offers the best room scale experience, hands down. And some of that is just marketing speak. I would say 95% is marketing speak. And the reason is he has to say that, right? We've seen, or we have a general idea of the numbers for the first quarter of this year, of 2017, January, February, March. Sales weren't fantastic, but they weren't abysmal. They just kind of kept the status quo, right? If the sales for the second quarter, which is April, May, and we're almost past the halfway in June, right? So we should see those numbers in about 4 weeks. If they've gone down, we will see a price drop, regardless of what he says in this article. And we'll probably see it sooner rather than later throughout the summer, right? If they maintain status quo, I think we'll still see a price drop, but probably closer to the holiday season. If it's completely abysmal, I could see them stoking the fires. They won't do it day one because that would look, very desperate from a marketing point of view. But they'll work it into some kind of strategy within the next, month after that and justify a price drop. So another one that will be interesting to follow. All right, let's talk in the next story, this one from VentureBeat, about Nvidia. And I love the headline of this article. Not because I think it's amazing, but because I think it's so obvious and kind of not a story. I'll explain. So the headline of this VentureBeat article is, Nvidia keeps the faith for virtual reality on the PC. But if you understand Nvidia and AMD as companies, when it comes to PCs, you'll know that the only area they really have strength, like a good, bit of traction, is in gaming. Because most of the money is made on the integrated side, and Intel by far has the majority there, right? That's their part of the revenue pie. And AMD and Nvidia, they figure pretty, small on that pie chart. When it comes to gaming, it's a little bit reversed, but the numbers, even with that said, aren't as lucrative. And it's one of the reasons we haven't seen Intel tripping over themselves to come out with some amazing GPU, right? Because they don't need to. They've got the other part of the market. If they're threatened there, absolutely. And they're making strides towards gaming. But it's not crazy, aggressive, fast, right? For Nvidia and AMD's part, they have no choice. Gaming is their thing. Whatever comes along, they have to support. And right now it's virtual reality. Before that, it was 3D, et cetera, et cetera. You can go back, right? Frames per second before that. They have to support that. They have to support virtual reality. Unless there was an announcement that VR was officially dead, I wouldn't expect that to change or them to divert course at all, right? So that was what I thought the interesting part of the article was, not so much what they were talking about, which was, the Max-Q laptops, that their graphic cards, because of the GPUs getting smaller and smaller, they're able to, fit themselves into very slim laptops now, whereas a couple of years ago, that wasn't the case. That's all interesting too. I just thought the other part was a bit more interesting. All right. Next up, YouTube releasing some analytical tools for content creators making 360-degree videos. This one is neat from the point of view is there's another dimension that's not talked about in this article, and I'll explain. Analytic tools are great. They give you as a content creator all kinds of information, right? I know the geographic distribution of my viewers, the ages, where they spend their time, how long, all of that kind of stuff is fantastic. But those results are only as good as the data that gets input. And if you're in IT analytics or any of that stuff, we call it garbage in, garbage out. In other words, if you've got a survey and most of the people just goof on the survey and just fill in whatever, right? It's not accurate at all. And the only thing you're going to measure on there is quality of goofing, etc., right? So yeah, for the video analytics, and here's an example. One of the stats when they used this tool was 80% of people look forward. Does that mean that you necessarily have to put the most compelling content, in front of you? Or are there other reasons for that? I think it's as simple as that's what people are trained to do. And the author agreed with that respect, is that coming to 360 from traditional, we're trained to look what's in front of us, right? The monitor, the screen. But that's a learned behavior. And over time, we're going to relearn that. So you can see the statistic for people looking behind them is steadily increasing. So what'll be interesting is not necessarily the suite of tools you're going to be able to, have to study the analytics for 360, but it's how do you interpret that, right? How do you interpret those results? Because you got to take things like that into account. So you could spend a whole night talking about that kind of stuff. I think it's really neat. We're eventually going to get there where, the stats do mean something. But right now, the biggest challenge with those analytics is just understanding, right? What the results mean, interpreting those results. All right, and this last story, probably my favorite of the bunch because it has to do with historical stuff, which I am a super nerd for. We talked about Victorian photography before and how it seems strange that for a lot of Victorians, it was considered normal to prop up a dead family member for a family portrait. And when I say it was normal for them, is if we put ourselves into their shoes, it makes sense, right? Back then, you had three options to remember a family member? A painting, your memory, or the new art/technology of photography, right? And photography by leaps and bounds, unless, every single town or city in the world had amazing realist painters, you weren't going to beat photography. So from that point of view, it makes sense. But now let's talk stereoscopic. And Brian May from Queen. So he's one of the members of the band. He's got his doctorate. I think it's in physics or some kind of advanced mathematics. One of his hobbies is stereoscopic pictures. So you think, wow, okay, so he was probably into that when he was a teenager, right, in the 1960s? No. Stereoscopic photographs were huge in the Victorian era. And again, the medium was so new. Stuff like that. It was kind of like their VR HMDs, being able to view stereoscopic photographs. Why I think it's so cool, in the story, they've got a picture of an abbey, right? And in the 1500s, King Henry VIII, he ordered all of the Roman Catholic monasteries to be pillaged, looted, and razed, essentially, right? Razed as in to the ground, not from the ground. And what's neat is one of the stereoscopic pictures shows an abbey that if you look at it now in current pictures, it looks younger now than it did 150 years ago, right? And that's strictly because of the foliage that was growing on the ruins, that now that it's in trust and part of a heritage site, all of that foliage is cleaned and the ruins are maintained, right? So for me, just a really cool way, and I'll have some links. You can check out stereoscopic pics on your HMD of choice, Rift 5. I believe even PlayStation VR has it as well. And man, if you like history, it's seriously like time traveling. Just absolutely amazing. All right, guys, that is it for this Sunday. As always, cheers.